Hi, so welcome back. Hi. So, for those who've been watching my series, thank you very much. I wanted to kind of pose a question that's different today. Um, what if, and I don't know how many people have thought about this, but something that came to me before. What if we actually treated a language like it's a person, meaning like, basically it has its own identity, well, sort of like its consciousness, its own. I know that sounds a little metaphysical and woo-woo and all that stuff. But that's changing and people are waking up to it. And there's, if you don't get understand it, that's totally fine. It's fine. But what if language can be treated like a person? Meaning that for those specifically who have done something like what's called referred to as shadow work, we all have different parts of ourselves. We all have different aspects of ourselves. Because when we grow up, we are taught values, what systems and all that stuff that our parents knew, and they were taught by their parents, and then they were taught by their parents, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. It's been going on for since the dawn of civilization or human discovery of the self or self itself, if that makes sense, meaning identity, right? So that's the way it works, at least in the metaphysical level. And there's quantum physics behind this too. I don't know the details, but you write it down in the comments if you want to. I don't care. Um, it's said that the universe is expanding. That's because of our actual true connection to that, that we are universe learning of itself. We are a spiritual being having a human experience rather than human experience having a spiritual experience. When I say spiritual, I mean like energetic, all that stuff, everything. Like literally from the physical to the non-physical form, everything is there. So that means that there's multiple aspects of ourselves. I know that kind of doesn't make sense right now, but because that's why when you get to know someone, there's like, you wonder, it's like, why do they behave differently when they're at home versus when they're in public? That's because that's an aspect of themselves, different persona. Carl Jung states that we have different archetypal parts of ourselves, right? So, and I know that's a psychological thing. I'm not going to go into the psychology of it. Okay. So what if language exactly is like that? When I say language, I don't just mean like Japanese, English, German, Italian, Spanish, French, Swahili, Mongolian, Kazakh, you name it, whatever. I'm talking about not the official thing, but how communication flows. For those who have done some research, at least, there's a thing called the language or dialect continuum. What you say is going to be different from what another person says, specifically because of the language you picked up or acquired, just like your mother would have a different type of, let's say, English. This is the way they use it. You'll know how it sounds, you'll know how it feels because it's intrinsic, it's instinctive, it's intuitive. You'll sense it right away. You'll know what I'm talking about. Um, for those who don't know what I'm talking about and they don't feel that, that's fine. There's no judgment there. I'm just saying there is an intrinsic knowing. Um, so what if language was like that? So in any case, what if language instead we treated that as a person? That means that when we're trying to so-called learn a language, that instead of treating it like in order to get to know you, because this song was popping in my head earlier, and I said that song, if you don't know me by now. It just I find that song ridiculous. You'll never get to know someone fully because that's that again, based on my previous videos, the past video even before this one, we're so caught up with the whole idea of like it has to be we have to get to know a person based on how much information we know about them or how much we because there's a confusion between the thought and the heart, so the brain and the heart. So when we get to know someone, we think that we know them, and our heart says like when I say heart, I mean like the soul knows just who they are and accepts them for who they are unconditionally and wants to do that. But the mind gets in the way, and the unhealthy ego comes in the way and goes. When I say unhealthy ego, by the way, I mean ego is not good or bad. It's a filter. It's how we perceive things. It's identity. That's why I said in my previous video, that's how it is. Every person is just different. That's why you can't generalize and say by race, by astrological sign, by gender, by social status. You can't generalize it just, like, oh, all attorneys, all lawyers are like this. All white people are like this, or all um, Sagittarians are like this, or all whatever, black hair or blonde people are like, you can't generalize. Generalization can be just approached like as a fun and curious way, but then once we start to get to know someone, we'll know that every person is different, but more at the intrinsic level. That's really getting to know someone, but it's technically you already know them. So same thing with language. You already know a language. You already know how, in other words, communicate. In French, for example, they say la langue versus langage. Langue is that content. Langage is how you communicate. So that, to me, that means that language truly stems from that, because we were not adults before we were children. So in other words, we were picking up our first language before anything else. Meaning, what I mean by that is we were in an acquisitional mode, natural absorbing, before we started becoming jaded, before we started becoming like question everything, doubt ourselves, and question this, and it's just analysis paralysis and all that, right? So getting to know a language like is just like getting to know a person. So by allowing ourselves to be in that mode of that curiosity, that childlike state, even as adults, for me personally, it's opened up so much, right? And I'm not looking for perfection anymore. I'm not looking for like, I need to know 10,000 words or 100,000 words. Mm, I need to be perfect. Oh, I'm not getting hired by this. Fuck that. So, because that means that old way of system, that old belief worked for that time. It just doesn't work anymore for me. So for me, I want things back to the way it naturally was, intrinsically it was. I call this primordial sovereignty. So, and everything is impermanent. Again, just because of the human, we're so fearful of the impermanence. Like, we're gonna die. The pandemic came. Not to insult anyone, but I was deathly scared of that. But I realize now that it's like I just have to fucking let go. Just like, and I say that swearing because it's like it's true. You can't change the inevitable. It will come. Birth will come, death will come. Everything else in between is just a play. Everything is an acting. Everything is the stage. Everything is just meant to be experienced. And it just came to me before. I said, everything has already happened. All there is left to do is experience it. That's why the present moment is always the key. Because past is just memory. Future is not there yet. So we have no concept of it. But that's all it is. There are fictitious in the physical world. They're energetic things that don't exist yet. But at the same time, they all have existed because we know future is really imagination. The past is memory. So, right, if you can understand that, that's what that is. If you don't, that's totally fine too. So again, I'm not judging you or anything. But that's what it is. So when it comes to this whole thing with language, as in like langage, right? That's what's going to also help us to tap into languages themselves. We just have to filter it. So in other words, when we look at a different language, like if you compare German to Dutch, for example, two different ways of seeing things, two filters, two so-called like egos, right? But even within those, you have like dialect continuums. There's different aspects of themselves. In other words, even those have different personalities of themselves, different persons, right? Different. Okay, right? Dialect of Dutch, for example, dialect of this and dialect of this, and then the subdialect and the subdialect. And then there's the personal dialects, individual dialects. That's just putting words into it, but you get my point, right? So that's it. I thought I'd pose that. Thank you for watching again. See you guys later.